The first thing she was aware of was the light. It was a soft, gray light, filtering through a canopy of heavy, dark velvet. The second thing was the pain, a dull, throbbing ache at the back of her skull that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. She tried to move, to lift a hand to the source of the discomfort, but her limbs felt like lead, weighted down by an exhaustion that was more than physical. She blinked, her eyelids scraping like sandpaper. The world above her resolved from a blur into a high, coffered ceiling of dark wood. She turned her head slowly, the movement sending a fresh wave of nausea through her. The room was vast, shadowy, and opulently furnished. A fireplace large enough to stand in dominated one wall, its hearth cold and filled with the gray ash of a long-dead fire. Tapestries depicting hunting scenes hung between bookshelves groaning with leather-bound volumes. The air was cold, smelling of beeswax, old paper, and a faint, cloying scent of dried roses. Where am I? The question echoed in the hollow space of her mind, finding no purchase, no answer. A more fundamental question followed, one that sent a chill skittering down her spine, colder than the linen sheets beneath her. Who am I? Panic, sharp and primal, began to claw its way up her throat. She pushed herself up on her elbows, ignoring the screaming protest from her head. The movement caused the room to tilt and swim. She was in a massive four-poster bed, the posts carved into grim, gothic spirals that seemed to scrape the ceiling. The door to the room opened with a soft click. A woman stepped in, her posture ramrod straight, her severe black dress rustling as she moved. She was perhaps in her 50s, with steel-gray hair pulled into a tight knot at the nape of her neck. Her face was a mask of polite neutrality, but her eyes, a pale, watery blue, held no warmth. "Ah, you're awake," the woman said, her voice as crisp and cold as the room. She carried a small tray with a glass of water and a single white pill. "The doctor said you would be disoriented." Who are you?" The sound of her own voice was a stranger's, a low, slightly husky contralto. "Where is this?" "I am Mrs. Albright, the housekeeper." She set the tray on the nightstand. "And this is Blackwood Manor. You are home, Lady Blackwood." The title landed like a physical blow. Lady Blackwood meant nothing. It was a name for a ghost. "I don't understand," she whispered, her fingers clutching at the sheets. "What happened to me?" "You took a fall, my lady," Mrs. Albright said, her tone impeccably even. "On the main staircase 2 days ago. You struck your head. The doctor believes your memory loss is a temporary condition, a result of the trauma." "A fall?" she repeated, the words hollow. She looked down at her own hands. They were slender, the nails neatly shaped but unadorned. There were no rings. No marks of any kind. They were the hands of a stranger. "My name? What is my name?" "Your name is Elara Blackwood," Mrs. Albright stated. "You are the wife of Lord Alistair Blackwood." As if summoned by his title, a figure appeared in the doorway. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark, impeccably tailored suit that seemed to absorb the room's meager light. His hair was the color of raven's wings, swept back from a high, intelligent forehead. His features were starkly handsome, all sharp angles and planes, but it was a beauty that was cold and forbidding. His eyes, a deep, stormy gray, fixed on her, and in their depths she saw no flicker of relief, no tender concern for a wounded wife. There was only a watchful, guarded intensity. "Elara," he said. His voice was a low baritone, smooth as polished stone and just as unyielding. "Mrs. Albright informed me you had woken." He stepped fully into the room and his presence seemed to shrink the vast space. Elara found she could not hold his gaze. It was too penetrating, too analytical. She looked down at her hands again, feeling a flush of confusion and something else, a faint, inexplicable prickle of fear. "Lord Blackwood," she said, testing the name. It felt foreign on her tongue. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Alistair," he corrected, though there was no softness in the correction. "You are my wife. You may use my given name." "I'm told." "I had an accident," she said, struggling to form the words. "I don't remember anything. Not this place. Not you." "I am aware," Alistair replied. He did not come to sit beside her on the bed. He remained standing, a distant, imposing figure. "The doctor has assured me your faculties are otherwise intact. Your memory will likely return in time. Until then you must rest." His words were correct, but utterly devoid of emotion. This was the man she was supposedly married to? This cold, distant statue? The thought of sharing this bed, this life, with him sent a fresh wave of panic through her. There was no familiarity, no spark of recognition, only a yawning chasm of emptiness. "Rest," he repeated, his tone final. He glanced at Mrs. Albright. See that she has everything she needs. With a last unreadable look in Elara's direction, he turned and left, his footsteps echoing down the hall. The silence he left behind was heavier than before. Mrs. Albright helped her take the pill and sip the water. "It will be easier once you are on your feet," the housekeeper said, her manner still impeccably professional. "Familiarity will breed remembrance." But as Elara lay back against the pillows, staring at the grim carvings on the bedposts, a terrible certainty settled in her gut. She was a prisoner in a gilded cage, with a head full of shadows and a husband who looked at her as if she were a puzzle to be solved, not a wife to be cherished. And the greatest terror of all was the chilling thought that perhaps, just perhaps, this cold emptiness was exactly what she deserved. The days bled into one another, a monotony of gray light, quiet footsteps, and the ever-present, throbbing void in her mind. Elara was a ghost in her own life, drifting through the cavernous, echoing halls of Blackwood Manor. Under Mrs. Albright's stern guidance, she learned the rhythms of the house. She learned that breakfast was served precisely at 8, lunch at 1, and dinner at 7, during which she would sit at one end of a 20-foot mahogany table while Alistair sat at the other, the silence between them punctuated only by the soft clink of silverware. He was always polite. He inquired after her health, asked if she found her rooms comfortable, if the meals were to her liking. But his eyes never warmed. He was performing a part, and she was the audience who didn't know the lines. She tried to find clues, anything to anchor herself to this reality. Her wardrobe was filled with beautiful, expensive dresses in somber colors, deep blues, forest greens, charcoal grays. The fabrics were lush, silks, velvets, fine wools, but the styles were modest, almost severe. They felt like costumes. She found no journals, no personal letters, no photographs. It was as if Elara Blackwood had sprung into existence the moment she woke up in that bed. One afternoon, driven by a restless desperation, she ventured into the library. It was a breathtaking room, 2 stories high with a wrought iron gallery running around the second level. The air was thick with the scent of leather and aging paper. She ran her fingers along the spines of the books, hoping for a flicker, a whisper of a past life. Looking for something in particular? She jumped, her heart leaping into her throat. Alistair stood in the doorway watching her. He moved with a predator's silence. I don't know, she admitted, her hand falling to her side. "I thought perhaps a familiar title." "Your tastes tended towards poetry," he said, walking into the room. He went to a specific shelf and pulled out a slim, leather-bound volume. "Tennyson. You were fond of him." He held the book out to her. She took it, her fingers brushing against his. The contact was brief, but a jolt, like a static shock, passed between them. She saw his eyes widen almost imperceptibly before the shutters came down again. Had she imagined it? She opened the book. The pages were clean, the binding stiff. It looked brand new, never read. "Thank you," she murmured. He gave a curt nod. "I have business in the city. I will be away for a few days. Mrs. Albright will see to your needs." And just like that, he was gone again, leaving her alone with the unread Tennyson and a growing sense of unease. Your tastes tended towards poetry. The phrasing was so clinical, so observational. Not "you loved Tennyson," but "you were fond of him." As if he were describing a subject he had studied from a distance. His absence, however, was a liberation. The oppressive weight of his presence lifted, and the manor, while still vast and lonely, felt less like a prison. She explored more boldly. She found the music room with a grand piano that was perfectly in tune, though Mrs. Albright claimed neither the lord nor the lady played. She found the morning room, its east-facing windows catching the weak morning sun. It was on the 3rd day of his absence, in a dusty little-used solarium at the back of the house, that she found the first crack in her reality. Tucked behind a large, withered fern was a small, framed embroidery. It was a simple, amateurish piece, a few clumsy daisies stitched onto a linen sampler. But it was the initials stitched in the corner that made her blood run cold. E.W. E.W. Not E.B. Elara Blackwood should have been E.B. So who was E.W.? Her hands trembled as she held the small frame. This was hers. She knew it with a certainty that went beyond memory. She could feel the ghost of the needle in her fingers, the concentration of making each stitch. This was a fragment of her, a piece of the person she was before. Before what? Before she became Elara Blackwood? She hid the sampler under a loose floorboard in her bedroom, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was her first secret, her first act of rebellion against the pristine, manufactured narrative she had been given. E.W. The initials were a key, but she had no lock to put them in. That night as she lay in bed, a storm broke over the moors. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room in stark, silver bursts. Thunder rolled, a deep, menacing growl that shook the very foundations of the manor. And with the storm came a memory. It was not a clear picture but a sensation. The smell of rain on hot asphalt. The sound of laughter, her own laughter, bright and unrestrained. The feeling of strong, warm arms around her, and the scratchy wool of a green sweater against her cheek. It was a feeling of safety, of joy, of a love that was vibrant and alive. It was the absolute antithesis of everything she felt in Blackwood Manor. The memory was gone as quickly as it came, leaving her gasping, tears streaming down her face. She wept for the loss of that feeling, for the ghost of that laughter. And she knew, with a terrifying and absolute clarity, that the woman who had laughed in the rain, the woman who had loved a man in a green sweater, had never ever been the wife of Lord Alistair Blackwood. Alistair returned, and the manor once again constricted around her. The memory of the rain and the laughter was now a secret treasure, a burning ember she hid deep within herself. She watched him more carefully now, searching for any sign of the man she might have once been. She noticed things she had missed before. The way his eyes would sometimes linger on her when he thought she wasn't looking, not with affection, but with a complex mixture of frustration and something else. Something that looked almost like guilt. She saw the way he would sometimes clench his left hand into a fist, the knuckles white as if holding back a torrent of words. He was a man under immense strain, a man playing a part that did not fit. One evening after dinner, he did not immediately retreat to his study. Instead, he stood by the fireplace in the drawing room, a glass of amber whiskey in his hand. "The doctor will be visiting again tomorrow," he announced, his back to her. Elara's heart skipped a beat. "Why?" "A routine follow-up. To assess your progress." He took a sip of his drink. "It has been 3 weeks. He hopes there may be some signs of returning memory." "Perhaps there have been," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He turned slowly, his gray eyes sharp. "Oh. Fragments," she said, choosing her words with care. "Sensations mostly. Nothing concrete." "What kind of sensations?" he asked, his tone deceptively casual. She decided to test the waters. "Happiness," she said, meeting his gaze. "I remember feeling truly wildly happy. The smell of rain. Laughter." His face remained an impassive mask, but the glass in his hand trembled slightly, the liquid catching the firelight. "Memory is a fickle thing, Elara. It often paints the past in rosier hues than it deserved. Was I not happy here, Alistair?" The question hung in the air, a direct challenge. He set his glass down on the mantelpiece with a sharp click. "Happiness is a fleeting commodity. We had an understanding. A partnership." "What kind of partnership?" she pressed, feeling a strange courage bubbling up inside her. "The kind that suits people of our standing," he said, his voice hardening. "This line of questioning is not helpful. You need to focus on recovering, on accepting your life as it is now, not chasing phantoms." Phantoms. The word was a slap. The laughter, the warmth, the green sweater, were they just phantoms? Or was this cold, sterile existence the real phantom? The next day the doctor, a kindly elderly man named Dr. Matthews, examined her. He asked her questions, tested her reflexes, shined a light in her eyes. "The physical healing is progressing well," he said, packing his bag. "The memory, it will return in its own time. It is often a traumatic event that triggers it. Sometimes revisiting the site of the accident can help." Alistair, who had been standing by the window, stiffened. "That will not be necessary." "But my lord," the doctor said gently, "it is a common therapeutic technique. To confront the fear, to recontextualize the event." "I said it is not necessary." Alistair's tone was final, brooking no argument. "The staircase has been repaired. There is nothing to see." His vehemence was a red flag. Why was he so determined to keep her from the staircase? Later that night, long after the house had fallen silent, Elara crept from her room. She needed to see the staircase. She moved like a shadow through the dark halls, her bare feet silent on the cold stone and thick rugs. The grand staircase swept down into the main foyer, a magnificent curve of dark oak and polished brass. It was, as Alistair had said, perfectly repaired. There was no sign of any accident. She stood at the top, looking down, trying to force a memory, any memory. Nothing came. Only a vague, formless dread. Disappointed, she turned to go back to her room when her eye caught a sliver of light from beneath a door she had never noticed before, tucked away in an alcove behind the staircase. A servant's door, perhaps? Driven by an impulse she didn't understand, she approached and turned the handle. It was unlocked. The door opened onto a narrow, steep staircase leading down into darkness. A servant's stairwell or perhaps a passage to the cellars. But why was there a light on down there? She descended, the cold stone seeping through her thin nightdress. The stairs ended in a short corridor with a single door at the end, from under which the light shone. She pressed her ear to the door but heard nothing. Taking a deep breath, she turned the knob and pushed it open. The room was not a cellar. It was a study, but unlike Alistair's formal, public study on the main floor. This was a personal space, cluttered and lived in. A single lamp on the desk cast a warm, intimate glow over piles of books, scattered papers, and a half-finished glass of brandy. And on the walls, her breath caught. The walls were covered in photographs. Dozens of them. And in every single one it was her. But it was not the her she saw in the mirror. In these photos her hair was windswept, her smile was easy and genuine, her eyes sparkled with life. She was standing on a city street, laughing. She was on a beach, her trousers rolled up, kicking at the surf. She was in a cozy-looking cafe, leaning across a table, her hand resting on the arm of a man. The man. He was not Alistair. He was younger, with sun-streaked brown hair and a face that was kind, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled at the camera, at her. He was wearing a green sweater. The world tilted. Elara staggered to the desk, her legs giving way. She gripped the edge of the wooden surface, her knuckles white. This was the man from her memory. This was the source of the laughter, the safety, the joy. Her eyes scanned the desk, frantically looking for a name, a clue. Her gaze fell on an open ledger. It was filled with Alistair's sharp, angular handwriting. She read the heading at the top of the page, Project EW Phase 3, Integration. EW. The initials from the sampler. With a trembling hand, she picked up a sheet of paper that lay beside the ledger. It was a contract, crisp and legal. At the top it read, Matrimonial and Seclusion Agreement. Her eyes, blurring with tears, scanned the text. Between Lord Alistair Blackwood, Party A, and Elara Winslow, Party B. Party B agrees to forfeit all prior identity and associations, and assume the title and role of Elara Blackwood. In exchange for the settlement of all debts incurred by Mr. Daniel Winslow, Party B agrees to permanent residence at Blackwood Manor, with all outside communication to be monitored and restricted. Elara Winslow. E.W. Daniel Winslow. The man in the green sweater? Her brother? Her lover? The pieces crashed together in a horrifying mosaic. This was no marriage. It was a transaction. A prison sentence. Alistair had not saved her from an accident. He had purchased her. Her past, her family, her love, he had paid to have it all erased. The accident on the stairs, had there even been one? Or was it a convenient cover for subduing a rebellious prisoner? A floorboard creaked behind her. She whirled around, the contract clutched in her hand. Alistair stood in the doorway, his face a thundercloud. The polite, distant mask was gone, replaced by a raw, furious intensity. His eyes went from her tear-streaked face to the paper in her hand, and his expression hardened into something dangerous. I told you, he said, his voice low and venomous, to stop chasing phantoms. Who am I? Elara demanded, her voice shaking with a fury born of betrayal and terror. She thrust the contract toward him. Who is Daniel Winslow? Alistair moved into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft, final click. The intimate space suddenly felt like a cage. Daniel is the reason you are here, he said, his tone flat. He is your brother. A wastrel and a gambler who accumulated debts far beyond his means. Debts to very dangerous people. So you, what? You bought his debts? And his sister along with them? The words tasted like ash. I provided a solution, Alistair corrected, his eyes cold. Daniel's life was forfeit. I offered him a bargain. His debts would be cleared and he would be given a new start, far from here. In return I would take you. Take me? I am not a piece of property. You are now, he stated with a chilling simplicity. I needed a wife, an heir. The Blackwood line is ancient, and it was my duty to secure it. You are beautiful from decent enough stock, and your brother's predicament made you available. It was a business arrangement, Elara. One that saved your life and your brother's. The fall on the stairs, she whispered, the horror dawning. It wasn't an accident, was it? I was fighting you. I was trying to get out. To get back to my life. His silence was confirmation enough. A wave of nausea washed over her. He had imprisoned her, and when she had resisted he had, what? Pushed her? Struggled with her? The gap in her memory was a black hole of violence. And my memories? The doctor? The doctor is in my employ, Alistair said, a hint of weariness in his voice now. We hoped the head trauma would soften your resistance, make you more amenable to your new role. It seems we were mistaken. All of it was a lie. The concern, the diagnosis, the hope for recovery, all a carefully staged play, and she was the dupe, the amnesiac bride stumbling through a script she never agreed to. You are a monster, she breathed. I am a pragmatist, he shot back, stepping closer. This is your life now, Elara. There is no going back. Daniel is gone. The woman you were is gone. Accept it. Make a life here. It doesn't have to be unpleasant. He reached out to touch her arm and she flinched back as if burned. Don't touch me. A flash of genuine anger crossed his face then. You are my wife. In name only. By force and fraud. By law, he roared, his composure finally shattering. The sound echoed in the small room. He advanced on her, crowding her against the desk. Your signature is on that contract. You agreed to this. Under duress. To save my brother, she cried, tears of rage and helplessness streaming down her face. I would never have agreed to this. This slavery? To you. Something in her words seemed to strike a nerve. He stopped, his chest heaving, his face just inches from hers. The stormy gray of his eyes was churning with emotion she couldn't name. Anger, yes, but also a profound, shocking pain. You think I wanted this? He whispered, his voice ragged. You think I wanted a wife who looks at me with fear and loathing? A wife I had to purchase like a broodmare. Then let me go, she pleaded, her voice breaking. I can't. The words were final, absolute. The arrangement is made. The world believes you are Lady Blackwood. To undo it now would bring scandal, ruin. It is too late for both of us. He straightened up, pulling the mantle of Lord Blackwood back around him. The moment of raw emotion was gone, replaced by the cold, impenetrable facade. You will remain in your rooms until you have calmed down, he said, his tone icy. Mrs. Albright will bring your meals. This door, he gestured to the hidden study, will be locked. Do not attempt to find your way out of the manor again. The moors are treacherous and there is nowhere for you to run. He took the contract from her limp hand and turned to leave. At the door he paused. The man in the photographs, he said without looking at her. The one with the kind face. His name is Julian. You are going to marry him. He believes you are dead. He left then, locking the door behind him, leaving Elara alone in the room with the ghost of her former self, with the smiling, hopeful face of Julian, and with the devastating knowledge that her life was a beautiful, gothic lie. She was not an amnesiac bride. She was a buried woman, and Alistair Blackwood was the keeper of her grave. Confinement became her new reality. The doors to her suite were locked from the outside. Mrs. Albright brought her meals, her face an unreadable mask of duty. The kindly old housekeeper offered no sympathy, no acknowledgement of the changed circumstances. She was Alistair's creature, through and through. The initial, searing rage gave way to a cold, determined despair. She was trapped. Julian thought she was dead. Daniel was gone, paid off to disappear. She was utterly alone. She spent her days by the window, staring out at the desolate, beautiful moors. The landscape mirrored her soul, wild, untamed, but imprisoned by invisible boundaries. She traced the initials EW on the fogged glass. Elara Winslow. Who had she been? A woman in love with a life, a future. A woman with a brother she had clearly loved enough to sacrifice everything for. One evening, as Mrs. Albright set down her dinner tray, Elara spoke, her voice hoarse from disuse. Did you know? From the beginning? Mrs. Albright paused, her hand on the tray. She did not look at Elara. It is my duty to serve the Lord of Blackwood Manor. His business is his own. That's not an answer, Elara pressed, a spark of her old fire returning. You helped him build this prison. You looked me in the eye and called me Lady Blackwood, knowing it was a lie. The housekeeper finally met her gaze. Her eyes were not unkind, but they were resolute. This world, my lady, is not a kind one for women without fortune or protection. Your brother was a weak man. He would have dragged you down with him. Lord Blackwood, for all his methods, offered you security, a title, a roof over your head. Many would consider it a bargain. A bargain? Elara laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. He stole my life. He saved you from a worse one, Mrs. Albright said quietly. You may not believe it now, but it is the truth. Your brother was in debt to men who would not have been as clinical as his lordship. With that she left, locking the door once more. Her words planted a seed of doubt. Had Daniel's situation been so dire? Was this gilded cage truly preferable to whatever fate awaited her on the outside? The thought was seductive, a path to acquiescence, to giving up. But then she would remember Julian's face, the feel of the rain, the sound of her own laughter, and the ember of rebellion would glow anew. A week into her confinement, a storm rolled in, fiercer than the last. The wind howled around the manor like a banshee, rattling the window panes. Lightning lit the sky in frantic, strobing flashes. During one particularly violent clap of thunder, a memory, more vivid and terrifying than any before, slammed into her. She was running. Rain lashed her face, soaking through her thin dress. She was on the main staircase, not falling but fleeing. Alistair was at the top, his face contorted in anger, shouting her name. Elara, stop. She glanced back, her foot caught on the rug, and she was falling, tumbling, the world turning into a vortex of pain and fear. The last thing she saw before the darkness was his face, not angry but horrified, his hand outstretched, not to push but to catch her. She gasped, stumbling back from the window. The memory was a revelation. He hadn't pushed her. He had been trying to stop her from running. The accident was just that, an accident. A tragic consequence of her panic and his pursuit. It changed everything and nothing. He was still her jailer, but he was not her would-be murderer. The complex man she had glimpsed in his hidden study, frustrated, guilty, trapped in his own gilded cage of duty and lineage, was real. The storm reached its peak. A tremendous crack of lightning struck nearby, followed by the sound of shattering glass and a woman's scream from somewhere downstairs. Mrs. Albright. A moment later she heard the key turn in her lock. The door swung open. Alistair stood there, his hair disheveled, his waistcoat undone. In the flickering emergency lights, he looked more human than she had ever seen him. A tree branch has shattered the window in the foyer, he said, his voice tight. Mrs. Albright was cut by flying glass. It's not serious, but I need to see to her. The electricity is down. Stay in your room. But as he turned to leave, another memory, soft and devastating, surfaced. It was of Alistair, not as her cold husband, but in the early days perhaps. He was showing her the library, his voice earnest. You can read any book you like, he had said. I want you to feel at home here. And for a fleeting moment she had seen not a jailer, but a lonely man trying in his clumsy, damaged way to connect. Alistair, wait, she said. He stopped, his back to her. I remember the fall, she said softly. You were trying to catch me. You went very still. You didn't turn around. Why did you let me believe you pushed me? She asked. Because it was easier, he said, his voice low and raw. Your hatred was simpler than the truth. And what is the truth? He finally turned to face her. The storm raged behind him, illuminating the stark pain in his eyes. The truth is that I saw a beautiful, vibrant woman trapped in a life of struggle because of a feckless brother. I thought I could give her a better one. I thought I could shield her. But all I did was cage the bird, and in doing so I broke its spirit. And my own in the process. The confession hung between them, a bridge across the chasm of their lies. He had not known how to love her, so he had tried to possess her. And she, in her fight for freedom, had only seen the prison bars, not the lonely man who had built them around himself. In that moment, Elara saw not Lord Alistair Blackwood, the cold, distant aristocrat, but Alistair, the man. A man as trapped by his circumstances and his own flawed choices as she was. The power dynamic shifted. She was no longer just his victim. She was the only person in the world who knew the full, ugly truth of him. The storm began to subside, the wind dying down to a mournful sigh. The emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows in the room. What happens now? She asked. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time she saw no guard, no calculation, only a weary, devastating honesty. That, he said, is entirely up to you. The storm passed, and with it the old dynamic between them was washed away. Alistair did not relock her door. The pretense was over. They existed in the manor now as two wounded animals, circling each other in a new, uncertain truce. He began to eat his meals with her, not at opposite ends of the long table, but at the small table in the morning room. The conversations were stilted at first, fraught with unspoken apologies and accusations. But slowly they began to talk. He told her about the weight of the Blackwood name, the centuries of expectation, his own lonely childhood in this vast, echoing house. She told him the fragments of memory that returned, of a childhood by the sea, of a love for painting that she had abandoned, of Julian's proposal on a bridge overlooking the Thames. Speaking Julian's name was a risk, but Alistair did not flinch. He listened, his face a mask of quiet contemplation. "I hired investigators," he admitted one evening, "to find you. They reported on your life. Your art, your job at the bookshop, your relationship with Julian. It was all so bright, so full of color. I was envious. Envious enough to extinguish it," she said, not with bitterness but with a profound sadness. "I thought I could possess that light for myself," he said, staring into the fire. "It was the greatest folly of my life." As the days turned into weeks, a strange, fragile companionship began to grow. He showed her the parts of the estate he loved, the wild, overgrown gardens, the stable of quiet, gentle horses, the view of the valley from the highest point on the moors. He was a different man away from the formality of the manor, still reserved, but with a deep, quiet knowledge of the land and a dry, unexpected wit. She found herself, against all reason, starting to see the man he could have been, had he not been crushed by duty and his own misguided sense of possession. She saw the intelligence in his eyes when they discussed history, the hidden kindness in the way he spoke to his aging groundskeeper. One afternoon she found him in the music room, standing before the piano. "Did you ever play?" she asked. "A long time ago," he said. "My mother taught me." He sat down hesitantly and placed his fingers on the keys. He began to play a piece, something by Chopin, melancholic and beautiful. His playing was hesitant at first, then grew more confident. It was the most vulnerable she had ever seen him. In that moment something shifted inside her. The hatred had long since faded, replaced by a complex tapestry of pity, understanding, and a terrifying, budding empathy. This man had destroyed her life, but he was also a product of his own gilded prison. He was as much a victim of the Blackwood legacy as she was. The choice that lay before her, which he had given her the night of the storm, became heavier. She could leave. He had, in a quiet moment, given her the details of a bank account, enough money to start a new life anywhere she wanted. "If you go," he had said, "I will not stop you. I will tell the world my wife passed away from a lingering illness." Or she could stay. The thought was shocking. Stay in the gilded cage? But was it still a cage? The doors were unlocked. The jailer had thrown away the key. It was now just a house, a beautiful, lonely house on the moors, with a man who was as broken as she was. The final memory returned on a quiet, sun-drenched morning. She was in the hidden study, now open to her, looking at the photograph of Julian. She remembered the day it was taken. It was her birthday. He had given her a silver locket. She remembered the feeling of loving him, the simple, uncomplicated certainty of it. But with the memory came another realization. That love belonged to Elara Winslow. A young, hopeful woman who no longer existed. The woman she was now, the one who had known betrayal, confinement, and a strange, painful intimacy with her captor, was someone else entirely. She could no more go back to Julian than she could go back to being a child. She found Alistair in the library. He was looking out the window, his profile etched with a loneliness that was now familiar to her. "Alistair," she said. He turned. "I'm not going back," she said. Her voice was clear, steady. "Elara Winslow is gone. She died on that staircase." He watched her, his gray eyes wary, hopeful, afraid. "But I'm not going to be the wife you purchased either," she continued. "I will not be a broodmare for the Blackwood line. I will not live a lie." "Then what will you be?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. She walked towards him, stopping an arm's length away. She looked at this complex, difficult, wounded man who had turned her world to ash and in the aftermath, had shown her the stark, brutal truth of himself. "I will stay," she said, "but on my terms. As myself. Not as a phantom of a dead woman or a character in a story you wrote. We start again. Not as lord and bride but as Alistair and Elara. Two people in a big empty house who have both lost everything, and have to find a way to build something new from the wreckage." Tears glistened in his stormy eyes. He did not reach for her. He simply gave a slow, solemn nod, a promise and a surrender. "It will not be easy," he said. "I know. I will spend the rest of my life trying to atone for what I have done. I know that too." She offered him her hand. Not in submission but in partnership. A truce. A beginning. He looked at it for a long moment, then took it, his fingers closing around hers. His touch was no longer that of a jailer, but of a man clinging to a lifeline in a stormy sea. It was not a happy ending. It was not the passionate reunion with Julian that her old self would have wanted. It was something messier, more complicated and more real. It was an ending that was, for the first time, also a beginning. The amnesiac bride was gone. In her place stood a woman with a past, both painful and sweet, and a future that was terrifyingly, beautifully unwritten.